I'm Dave Greenwood, and this is Overcoming Distractions. If you are an adult with ADHD, a busy professional, an entrepreneur, a high achiever, or just need some strategies to navigate your adult ADHD, you're in the right place. Who am I? I'm an entrepreneur with ADHD and the author of 2 books, Overcoming Distractions and Overcoming Burnout. I coach and mentor people just like you, and together we navigate the ups and downs of adult ADHD. From getting out of our own way to helping people just like you thrive in the workplace. That's what I do. Want more info on working with me? Hit overcomingdistractions.com. Ready? Let's get to today's podcast. All right, gang, what's up? It's Dave. You know where you are, I think. If you don't, it's Overcoming Distractions. And thanks again for hitting that download button and hanging out with us. So if you would like to post a review of the podcast, I always like reading the reviews. I love the good ones. And occasionally I get a chuckle with the bad ones. And the other day, somebody posted a review that said, "My God, get to it, man." Because they said I rambled on and on and on. So if you're listening, this one's for you, because we are just going to get right to the point. All right. And what was that, like 30 seconds, Sarah?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you're doing good.
All right. We're getting right to the point. We're talking goals, whether you hate that conversation or not, but we're going to take a little bit of a twist on goal setting today. And I have back on the podcast one of the tried and true experts that we have had over the years, Dr. Sarah Reiff-Hekking, True Focus Coaching. You'll learn how to get a hold of her in a little bit. She does boot camps to get you to figure out how you're managing your time, your energy, all that. Welcome back.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I love being here.
Yeah, and I love having you here because I think we always have great discussions. You have some tremendous insight into this topic, goal setting, and how all the other things in our lives and our careers kind of intersect with that. So I love the way that you kind of methodically walk people through these topics. So, and I forget what we talked about last time, but we might have actually talked about goal setting last time.
We often do different flavors of it, though, because I feel like this is one of those topics that, and I was saying this to you just a minute ago before we pressed record, is that I feel like Americans are obsessed with goals, or maybe it's just because I write about it all the time and I'm a coach, and that's how I roll. My first question is always like, why are you doing what you're doing? Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
And I think that it can be a complicated thought process, because some people hear the word goal and they're like running the other way, right? Yeah. Because they feel like either they're not going to reach it, or they don't want to be told what to do. They don't have ownership of that goal. And I find it really helpful to back up and ask the question of, why do we even care about having goals to begin with? Like, why do we bother? It helps me, it helps my clients when I work more closely with people get really clear on, what's my ownership here? And why do I care about doing this stuff? And that really helps us take action and move forward on things. Yeah. So it wakes up our brain, that concept of, why do I care? What's meaningful to me? Yeah. So I like to back it up to, like, what does the science even tell us about why having a goal is important?
Yeah, no, and I think that's important. What I wanted to talk to you about today, and I know you probably encounter this all the time in your day-to-day workings with individuals, is sometimes maybe they're lost, or maybe they come to you and they say, I don't even know what type of goal I do need to set. And maybe it's a uh, life has changed, business has changed, the career has changed. Maybe they are to the point where they actually are burned out, and they just don't know how to how to go to the next step in maybe getting out of that burnout phase. So, but I want to go back to goals 101, and I'd like to hear it from you, is if you could define what a goal is, because I do think people hear that word and they go, "Oh my God, it's like running a marathon with no training," and we know it's not that. So, can you just define a goal for people briefly?
Yeah, I think, the way I use it with my clients, and I think the way most of us use it is it's just a target. It's a target about where you want to go. And I think the word goals get sort of overly used. So I like to use different language there, whatever's you can engage in, right? Because sometimes the word goal, my clients are like, don't talk about goals because that makes me want to rebel and do the opposite,
Yeah.
right? I want to do things the way I want to do them. So the conversation that I think is really important here is, why do you care about those things that you're supposed to be doing? And I'm doing air quotes, right?
Mm,
You're supposed to's. And are they really goals for you? Are there, like, why do you want to do them? Why are they even on your list to
yeah.
begin with, or in your brain? And so sometimes we have to start with, um, let me just get today and tomorrow and this week kind of handled, so that you then and get on top of enough stuff so then you can have the space to ask yourself, what are my targets?
Yeah.
But I think that it's helpful to think about a goal as just like, that's my target. That's where I want to steer. That's what I want to aim the arrow. And it can be long term, it can be short term, it can be the daily goal. And sometimes we need to back it up to a shorter time frame in order for us to be able to take advantage of using that concept.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think you're right. We hear that goal and it's like, oh, I have to run a marathon, or I have to do this, or I have to lose 100 pounds, or it's just like that seems to be the perception that many have of goals.
Well, I
And
think I think there's this conversation about what's the big hairy goal, and let's make it huge, and let's, like, what are your biggest dreams? And that has a time and a place. And if you're not feeling like you're up to that, then, like, what's my target for today? What would make me feel good about today?
mm,
What's the one thing that I know if I accomplish, I'm going to feel good about? Then let me be clear and let me just practice about doing the one thing a day that makes me feel good about accomplishing what I want to accomplish. And then you'll start to discover through that smaller step why you want to accomplish it. Like,
yeah,
why do you feel good? And sometimes we have to do it from the ground up. When I work with people on goals, sometimes we just start with, what's on your to-do list? And let's, like, sift through that, or the stuff that's floating through your head. If you don't have an actual to-do list, what's the stuff that you think you're supposed to be taking action on and you're not? And why do you think you should be taking action on it? Let's just get it all in one place.
yeah,
And then filter it from, feels important, this doesn't feel important, and why.
yeah,
And that helps us sort of sometimes locate within ourselves, why do you care about this? Right? And that's the core of motivation. That's the core of, how do I take the small steps, even when I'm tired, even when life is taking me sideways,
yeah.
right? Or the big steps, but why do I care? And sometimes we have to do it from the ground up. We can do it top down also, but sometimes our brains don't work that way, and that's okay.
I think you're right. And I've had numerous conversations with people where, uh, they don't have a to-do list system. Their calendars all over the place. They're not only that, but they're in a situation where others can book time on their calendar or book meetings and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the goals, I'm putting up my air quotes now, one of the goals that has worked relatively well with people is, when we start, I'm like, look, your only goal this week between now and the next time we chat is that just block out a section of time. I don't care what it is, 2 hours, 4 hours, one, just one. Set, understand what you're going to do at that time, and then keep your word to yourself. That's it. I'm not asking you to completely color code your calendar in 7 days. Just start. And a lot of people come back and say, that worked, because we just set
Yeah.
a tiny goal, as you mentioned,
Yeah, a small shift that has huge changes, right?
Yeah.
I once had a client who said, Sarah, you helped me move the molehills to get to the mountain,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes we see the mountain, and that might be the goal. Or we feel like literally there's a mountain on our desk or, in our brains, and we have to sort of scale that.
Yeah.
But start with something that you can practice, you can see success. And also, I think what I see all the time is that my clients are learning to trust themselves again.
Mm.
And that's exactly what you just, showed. Like, I need to know that when I say I'm going to do something, I'm actually going to do it. I'm not going to be pulled sideways. I'm not going to distract myself. I'm not going to be distracted by other people, other things. I just need to know that I can actually steer the target, right? I can steer the boat. And that once you start to see that you can do it in small ways and the impact that that has, then it's easier to move forward from there.
Yeah.
Then you're starting to, rebuild your belief. And this is actually one of the reasons why goals are helpful for people, is because they do help us understand that we can do what we say we're going to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be the big, hairy goal. It can be the, I want to work out once this week, or I want that half an hour of thinking time for me about my business this week.
Yeah.
And oh, wow, I did it. Yeah.
And I think this audience probably does get a little turned off by the massive big hairy goal, as you say. So that being said, how do we begin the process of kind of determining what goals we need to be setting? So I mean, I can think of a handful of things, whether it's manage my time better, or get X hours number back, or I need a new career, or I need to lose 50 pounds, or I just want to start exercising again, or eat better, or whatever the case may be. So how do you help people in that beginning phase of determining what types of goals they should be considering setting?
Yeah. So I think I always come to, first I start out with how far out do you feel like you can look and trust yourself? Because to your example earlier, sometimes we just need to get today and tomorrow handled, know that we're going to do the right stuff this week so that we then can take a deep breath and have enough space to be thinking out further than that. So until we kind of trust ourselves that I'm going to do some of what I say I'm going to do today, right? I'm going to be able to affect that. It's harder to want to think further out. And then that gets coupled with, sometimes we have brains that just, not because we're not smart people, but we're just not, our strength is not thinking out a year or 5 years, right? And I also think human beings in general have a hard time visualizing out more than 90 days.
Yeah.
So it's a skill that needs to be developed. And you need to practice that. So the first thing with goals is, how far do you want to be looking out? And set yourself up for success so that you get to check off the box, right?
Yeah.
You get to say, I did that, like you did with your client, right? Let's just do an hour this week that you want, getting that thing done that you want to get done, or spending the time on the thing you want to get done, right? Yeah. And I want to notice the subtlety there in the goal setting, right? So you probably didn't say, yeah, finish that project in the hour. You said, take the hour, work on the project, see how far you get, right? Yeah. So you get to say, no matter how much you got done in that hour, I spent that hour, check, right? That wakes up our brain.
And
that
that's
gives
a
us
win.
Good feedback. Yes, that's a win.
Yeah.
That's a dopamine hit. That's all of that stuff. So I always say, start first of all, how far can you look out? How far do you want to look out? And then you want to ask yourself, what are the goals that are most important to me for who I am in the world right now? Right. So one of the things we know scientifically when we put together goals that they need to be personally involving and meaningful, not what other people approve of or desire for you. And this is where our rebels kind of can get engaged pretty easily when your boss, your spouse, your parent, your past self,
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
says you're supposed to be doing this. And we haven't actively chosen that. It's I'm supposed to. And we haven't defined why we care. And that makes it easy to rebel against, to not move forward, to beat ourselves up, all of that stuff. So the first thing is really, it needs to be what we call intrinsic, right? Really important and meaningful to you. And it needs to be authentic, right? So do you really value that? Is that who you want to be in the world? Right? Is this really, really your goal? And so that's a great place to start. And I don't think it's ever a one and done, Dave. I don't think it's a one and done. I think it's something you keep checking in with and coming back to.
Yeah.
And when I first work with people on setting goals that look out further than a month, you know, first the goals keep changing because they're realizing what is it that I really want. But then over time we sort of settle into, oh, I can think out a year, and it's not my big goals really aren't changing. And that's because they've become aligned with those goals.
And that's this is a whole nother conversation.
Sure, we can talk for hours.
But you're right, that time horizon where
Mhm.
where I know a lot of people, whether, self-employed, maybe they're planning projects or what have you, and they had trouble even planning out a couple weeks on certain things. And then when they start to be able to manage projects and all the tasks associated with them, and their time, and they get a little more methodical, they say that they actually can increase that time horizon, so to speak, so that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also like, I'm noticing the language here, methodical, because some people are like, I don't want to be methodical. Right. So I just want to notice if that came up for you, there's ways to be consistent in a way that works with your own flow. So I call it a flexible template, right?
Yeah.
So you're doing the right things regularly enough. It doesn't have to be sort of lockstep or feel constraining.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and you and I have talked about that too, about the flexible template for managing, time and resources and what have you. And I think that I one thing that accomplishes is it allows you not to totally beat yourself up when you didn't get what you needed to get done, because shit happens.
Well, and it's the reality, right? So plan for reality instead of this belief of I'm gonna like pack all this stuff in and I'm gonna get it done. Most of us look at that and go, well, that's probably not true,
Yeah.
right? And so you're starting out with this, you know, this false premise, and you're not believing that it's true. So start to set yourself up for that. I can do that one thing, and then start to move towards that. So another thing that's really important with goals is you want to think about things that you're moving towards, not things you're moving away from.
Yeah.
Okay, so the framing of the goal. So I'm moving towards financial abundance, not away from debt, right? I'm moving towards health and well-being, not away from weight. So what do you get from that goal? What are you moving towards? And then you also want to make sure that you're framing it in an active way, the actions you can take, not I'm waiting for a change in circumstance where I'm miraculously going to be motivated to do those things, right?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't happen.
That is and I think you and I talked about that for overcoming burnout and somebody else, where and I had put my personal examples about public relations clients, not paying me, going out 60, 90 days. I'm doing the work. I was getting resentful and on all that stuff. And I think it was you and somebody else that said, instead of saying, I don't want to work with clients that don't pay me on time. It was like flip it over and say, no, I
Yeah.
want to work with clients that pay me on time, respect my time, are engaged in the process. That way I could look, as you say, towards a goal
Yes.
of shaping a business that aligned with my values. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that started to help to fuel you instead of drain you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was sucking the life out of me.
Yes. Yes.
Because
Yes.
every
Many of us
time
have been there. Yeah.
no, because every time I stated a goal, like I don't want to work with these people anymore. You're right. That's not really a goal. That's just saying I don't want to work with these people anymore. It's venting. It's being pissed off. It's
Yeah. It's something you're moving away from instead of something that you want to actively move towards.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. And, that's also, I think leads into this conversation that when you build different goals, because we have goals in different areas of our lives, and whether you're aware of it or not, some of the goals are implicit, right?
mm,
One of my implicit goals that I actually have made explicit to myself is that my home is my calm place, right?
yeah,
So I check in with that goal occasionally. Is my home calm and relaxing and a place that's a haven for me?
yeah,
And if it's not, then I ask myself, what do I need to shift, and how do I do that? Um, so so we often have implicit goals that it really helps to make explicit for ourselves so that we can see that we're actually taking action on that. And um, also, we need to make sure that goals in different areas of our lives are harmonious together, right? So, one of the things that happens is that we have a goal to do X at work and Y in our personal life, and they are not, that they compete,
yeah,
right? So the conversation that I love to have is, how do I do this and that? What's the and conversation? If I want to be healthy and strong and rested and run a business that is profitable and that I love, what does that look like?
I know when, and I've said this 100 times since I wrote Overcoming Burnout, as I said to so many people that there were a few times where somebody took a brick to the side of my head, and you were one of them. And I mean that in a good way, people. But what you just said is that a lot of us take our careers, we bust our ass, we're running our businesses, we're working for somebody else, and then our personal life gets the scraps of that time, and instead of and I don't like the phrase design a life because it's just so overused, but that's what you are telling me, is that what do you want personally, and how is your business or your career going to support that? That's the way it should be, but so many of us have that in the reverse, and that was like a huge wake up call to me when we were talking for Overcoming Burnout.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it happens the other way too. There's people that are like running around doing all family and personal stuff all day long, and then they wonder why they're not, they don't have clients and they're not running their business the way they want to, right?
Yeah,
It happens both ways. So the question becomes, how do you pull these things together and start to understand, the and conversation? And that's the most, I think, important thing, is that your goals start to complement each other, and
mm,
that you understand how that works. And if you have a big goal and you don't understand how you're going to do the other things, that's where you need to get out of your own head and have a conversation with the right person that can support you with that conversation, right? Because some people are going to be like, it can't be done. And maybe that's true, but I'm willing to bet that with some shifting of the goals a little bit, not letting them go completely, you can then start to say, oh, that's how it might happen, right? And lots of times it's going to happen in a way that we never would have, our brains might not have come up with it, or we haven't seen that model yet. So it's helpful to talk to somebody. And also, this is where getting stuff outside of your own head and having that conversation with a coach or a consultant, or a smart colleague or friend,
yeah,
that can be open to the conversation and supportive, where they can come up with solutions that you wouldn't have otherwise. And it also is where phrasing that I want this and that conversation is really important, because the methods to get to those two things simultaneously is going to look different than the method to get to one of them individually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we talk, you've been mentioning running a marathon. Okay, there's lots of people that train for marathons that don't have full-time jobs.
Hmm.
But if you're going to train for a marathon and you have a full-time job and you want to have relationships in your life, then you have to build it differently.
Yeah.
Right? So it's an important conversation to have, like, what's the and conversation? How is that going to work in this situation? And I'm going to be able to do the other things I want to do. And most of the time those problems are solvable, but it might not come from you, and that's okay. Nothing's wrong. We all need a village to help us with those things sometimes.
Yeah, no, and I, the other piece of that is I prided myself on being really good at managing my time. And then when I was burnt out and talked to you and others, I'm like, you know what? I could do a whole lot better.
Yes. Yes.
So there's always room for growth. And like you say, is that village where it's like, I would have never figured that out without maybe a little extra help,
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a colleague who recently said something like she like basically had this amazing business. She decided to make it portable. She and her husband were driving cross country, in a camper van and just exploring how. And she said, "You know what? I didn't actually realize in my other model of living and running my business that I didn't have to be exhausted all the time."
Mm-hmm.
Right? That and it was interesting coming from somebody who on the surface, and I think internally, felt very successful, was doing great work in the world and loving what she was doing. Right.
Yeah.
So just the shift of how do I do all of this and not feel exhausted, right,
Yeah.
is an interesting question.
Sure. Yeah. In the time we have left, I always want people to be able to walk away, as you know, and try and put something into action. So somebody's listening and they want to make some changes, set some goals. They realize they don't really have any goals. They're just kind of going, about their business or life. How do people begin the process of setting those goals? Is it small habits? Is it those tiny adjustments we talked about? And tell people how to determine if they're actually moving towards those goals, they're going in the right direction.
Yeah, so I would start with, what is the time frame that you feel almost confident with, right? So relatively confident with. So a lot of people come in and start to work with me and they're like, Sarah, I can't figure out what I'm doing today or tomorrow, or I have so many balls in the air, I just have to catch most of those. I can't really make a plan. So the plan might be, today I'm going to catch these 3 balls, right?
Yeah.
And then just practice doing that every day for a while. What are the balls I'm going to catch today? What are the things that I'm going to make sure I get done each day? And then noticing that you're getting them done, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this part of moving towards a goal where you need to keep assessing where you are now compared to where the goal is. And so it's helpful for lots of people that I work with to conceive it in this way. Where are you right now? And then what does finished look like? Right. Yeah. So the goal is what finished looks like. How will I know I've reached that goal? So if you want to run a marathon, you're running the marathon. But most people don't want to just run a marathon. They want to run a marathon with ease, right? Or they want to run a marathon and not, be crippled at the end, right? So build out the goal a little bit. And you might need to bring it back to, I'm going to walk for 15 minutes today. I'm going to walk for 15 minutes today.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk for 15 minutes a day, right? Until you get that done. And in terms of the productivity on projects or bigger or different sort of personal goals, you want to say, what's the one thing I want to do on this thing today, or maybe 3 times this week, right? And when are the best targets that where I think I'm going to get those 3 things in? And then where are my backup times in case it doesn't work, right? And give yourself that ability to be flexible. So you get to check off at the end of the week, I got those 3 things done. So start small and in the time frame that you want to build trust with yourself, and then notice what is working to help you take the action and move forward.
Yeah.
And notice that you are taking action and moving forward, even if it's a small step. Okay, this is what I call the what went well conversation. So reflect, what did I do well yesterday related to this particular goal, right? Or this week, whatever the time frame is.
Yeah.
And give yourself credit for that. Notice that your actions are moving you forward, and start to trust that you can take those actions. So there's always this, where am I now? Where do I want to go? What's the next 1 or 2 steps? Where am I now? Where do I want to go? What's the next 1 or 2 steps? And then as you start to add a timeline in there and a time horizon, right? That's longer than a day. It might just be a week to start out with. This week, I want to accomplish X related to this goal. Then you start to give yourself some mini deadlines, right? So, and, a goal is often time specific, right? You want to be trained for that marathon by race day. Sometimes we have to create race day for ourselves. And sometimes we're good at targeting when race day is going to be, and sometimes we're not.
That's true.
And that's okay, because goals need to be flexible and appropriate. So, I have a client who's checking off really big goals, year-long goals, and she's like, I haven't gotten to this one yet. And the conversation is, yeah, but you added this other big one, right? And you purposefully decided to set that one aside. Don't beat yourself up about it. You got to do this amazing, cool thing that you just added, that was an opportunity that popped up that when you set your goals, you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So you need to give yourself some flexibility. You just want to make sure that you're not forgetting that you have goals, and that you're not blowing yourself off.
Yeah.
But it is a practice, and we each need to figure out, how do we stay in a relationship to those goals, and what is the duration that we're up for right now.
Yeah. Solid advice, as always. What's going on at True Focus Coaching? You got some boot camps coming up, or what do you got going on?
I do. So I run a virtual training called Time Matters Bootcamp Live once a year, and it's coming up. It's November 30th, December 1 and 2. You can click in from wherever, and it is a fun, believe it or not, fun, engaging, impactful productivity training. And we go through all of the core techniques that will form a basis of your how do I get to do what I want to be doing plan.
Yeah.
It's called Time Matters Bootcamp Live. Early bird registration is available right now, so click the link. And you can find it at createfocusnow.com. That's createfocusnow.com. And then always, if you want free resources, you want to learn a little bit, you want to talk to me, go to truefocuscoaching.com. That's truefocuscoaching.com. And there's a bunch of resources there to take a look at. If you want to talk with me about if and how I might be able to help you, you can click the strategy session button and apply for a time just to talk to me. No cost. I want to see if and how I can be helpful, and we can just have a conversation about getting to know each other.
Cool. I'll have those links in the show notes, as us professional podcasters say.
In the show notes. Yes!
In the show notes, people. So for the Time Matters Bootcamp and the resources. So Thank you again. I always love having you on. You definitely need to come back because there's always something for us to discuss. So
Always happy to talk. Love these conversations. And if you're out there and you're listening, pick one small thing to move forward from today and just practice trusting yourself. That's all.
that's
Just
right.
practice trusting yourself.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.